I'm Natasha Kirchuk, and thanks for joining us from our studios in Israel. Coming up in today's newscast, Israel upgrades Hebron to an official Israeli settlement. Israel's ambassador to Egypt returns after 8 months, and it's time to give little puppy Mc-Pupperson a bath because he might just win you an all-expense-paid trip to the Holy Land. Stay tuned for the latest news in Israel. The dilemma surrounding Israel's settlements in the West Bank has taken center stage this week, and there's just been a breaking development. Israel's defense minister has just declared the Jewish community of Hebron is officially gaining state recognition as an Israeli settlement. This news comes on the heels of Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu's speech on the matter, promising that the state would not evacuate any more settlements under his watch.
Zohi nachlat avotenu, zohi artzenu. חזרנו לכאן כדי להישאר לתמיד. לא תהיה יותר עקירה של יישובים בארץ ישראל. לא יעקרו יישובים. אגב, זה הוכח שזה לא עוזר לשלום. עקרנו יישובים. מה קיבלנו? קיבלנו טילים. ובכן, זה לא יהיה יותר.
The settlements have long been a major road bump in advancing peace talks between Israel and the Palestinians, since Palestinians believe this endangers any possibility for a future Palestinian state. The region has seen 2 peace envoys from the UN and the US over the last week, with the discussion of settlements at the top of everyone's list. But Team Trump remains unfazed by Netanyahu's commitment to expanding in the West Bank, even at the protest of the Palestinians. The White House is continuing to put together its peace plan. This upgrade of Hebron to official settlement status is a major shift in state policy, one that Israel hopes will bring Jewish life in Hebron to some kind of normalcy. Until now, the Jews living in Hebron have lived under the Palestinian Authority's municipality, served by the city's mayor, Sheikh Taysir Abu Sneineh, who served jail time for his role in murdering 6 Israelis in a terror attack. Defense Minister Avigdor Lieberman's announcement means a major win for the 1,000 Jews living as a minority in Hebron, because now they'll be administered by Israel's civil administration. They hope this will bring enforced security and amenities to normalize their lives in a very stormy part of the world. Massive floods from Hurricane Harvey continue their sweep across Texas, and more water has been predicted to fall, with at least 30 people already reported dead and untold devastation on the way. The Israeli humanitarian organization IsraAid has sprung into action to help. Well, with me in the studio now to tell us more is co-CEO of IsraAid, Yotam Politzer. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
So this is obviously a very intense time, as it always is for your organization, but IsraAid has already made it to Houston. Can you tell us a little bit about the work that you guys are doing on the ground?
So we have actually 2 teams that are on the ground now. The first team arrived already yesterday, and the second team arrived today. We have, our team is doing 2 types of activities.
Okay.
The first thing is actual support with the relief distribution and the debris removal of all the people, who lost their houses, who lost everything they had, basically. So we have a 5 people, very professional team that's focusing on that. We're working very closely with the local government, the Red Cross, an amazing organization called Team Rubicon that's made out of a lot of veterans, and of course the Jewish community who suffered a lot in this terrible disaster. And the second part is providing psychological support for the people who are already evacuated and are stuck in the shelters and are waiting for news about everything they had. Some of them, lost their loved ones. So both the psychological and the physical is really important at this stage. And we're already there, and we're planning to see more and more teams, because it's going to take a while.
I mean, I think the devastation here, nobody really understood how big it would be. And I think what's also interesting is that IsraAid typically is not going to the United States to do this type of work, right?
Yeah, I mean, first of all, it's a very interesting and hectic time for us. Just in the last 2 weeks, we responded to a terrible flooding where more than 1,000 people lost their lives in Nepal, India, and Bangladesh.
Which we're not really seeing that much on the news. Although
which is a different issue. And terrible mudslides in Sierra Leone, where we had a team that was based there since the Ebola and are still there and was again able to respond. So it's a very hectic time. You're right that the U.S. is not our typical place, but we did actually operate in Hurricane Katrina, in Hurricane Sandy, in the recent flooding in Louisiana, in Baton Rouge. We do see that we have an added value. First of all, the devastation is beyond words, and we're seeing the news. And also, the specific expertise that we're bringing is something that is still a big gap even in the US.
So how long do you predict the Israeli team is going to be there on the ground?
It's remained to be seen. We're, unlike in typical crises like that in the US, we typically stayed for 1 to 3 months. Here it actually could take longer. It will obviously depend on the type of support and the needs that we identify on the ground. But in terms of the debris removal and the psychological support, there is work here for 6 months, if not more.
Right. It's interesting, but how do you come to that number? How do you get to those checkpoints when you know your work is done in a place like this? Because I can imagine that's a very fine line. It's a fine line,
and you could, in a way, you can always find more things to do. But we get, daily reports from our teams on the ground, and we have a lot of work in other parts of the world, so we're very careful about picking where we're going to invest our very limited resources and time and efforts. And you can see when the big mass of people are going back to their homes or are already based in temporary housing, for example, when people receive the local services, whether it's psychological or medical support, that means it's time for us to move on. And that's our goal. Our goal is not to be needed.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I guess the final question that we have is just for our viewers, for those of us who want to help, especially Israel, how can they do that?
So we have, if you go on our website, israelaid.org, we have our campaign, our fundraising campaign that you can see on the screen here. And we're looking for any kind of support because even a small donation goes a long way. We're also looking for professionals who wants to join the team, either in the US or here. Yeah. We're looking for professionals, so we can't, unfortunately, take anyone who wants to go.
So that could be therapists, doctors, psychologists.
So it's mostly people with either psychological skills, social workers, therapists, psychologists, etc., or people who have specific experience with disaster management and debris removal. We have a great team, but we always look for more people.
Of course. Well, thank you so much for coming in, Yotam. As always, we are very proud that we can say your organization comes from this country and are proud of the work that you do.
Thank you very much.
Well, we have breaking developments from southern Lebanon, where the Lebanese army has just defeated Islamic State fighters following its largest military offensive yet. Lebanon and Hezbollah have now allowed ISIS fighters to withdraw from the area in exchange for the bodies of 8 Lebanese soldiers captured and murdered by the Islamic State. Lebanon's attack against the Islamic State along the southern border with Syria was its biggest operation ever, and one backed with U.S. military and Pentagon support. This has been a critical battlefield for Lebanon ever since ISIS fighters invaded the area and seized control back in 2014. After years of unsuccessful attempts, Lebanon was at a stalemate with how to regain control of the region, with Iran threatening to slip in through the cracks of instability. President Trump pledged U.S. support to the Lebanese army to help it rid ISIS from its borders, a promise which has now given the Lebanese army the edge it needed to overpower the Islamic State. In a two-front attack with Hezbollah, Lebanon has now forced the Islamic State into a ceasefire. But it looks like the Islamic State has successfully negotiated safe passage out of the war zone, complete with air-conditioned buses, all in exchange for the bodies of 8 Lebanese soldiers whom ISIS killed during captivity. Nearly 600 Islamic State fighters were sent off with a guarded convoy and have just been released in eastern Syria. This is the first publicized deal ever made with the Islamic State, which comes as a shock to many of the countries involved in the conflict. The Iraqi Prime Minister was especially disturbed that Syria had released hundreds of Islamic extremists right along its own borders. This all comes after weeks of some of the most intense fighting on the Syrian-Lebanese front in years, the aftermath of a long battle that promises to only get bloodier as time goes on. Well, we've been following the latest developments with Israel's troubled Egyptian embassy, which has been opened and closed twice already in the last decade. Well, now it looks like Israel's ambassador has just returned to Cairo with his entire staff. And with us to explain what this means for Israeli-Egyptian relations is ILTV's Aaron Porras. Now, Aaron, what does this mean? You know, the ambassador is back to work, right?
I mean, technically, he's always been working. The ambassador, David Govrin, has just been fulfilling his role from within Israel. Now that he is going back to Cairo, though, at least he has a little bit more ability to rebuild, if not build upon, the frayed relationship that we have with Egypt. And
the timing, I mean, it's certainly right, because Israel's embassy in Jordan is still closed, and Hamas has just restored ties with Iran, while the Palestinian Authority is now getting closer with Turkey, right? So
yeah, and you know, yeah, like you said, all those concerns are very big to Israel, especially, you know, Egypt shares a lot of those concerns with Israel when we're talking about ISIS or Hamas in Gaza and smuggling, and there are a lot of different things. You know, we have a lot of intelligence and security cooperation with Egypt. So it's really great that some of these relations are coming back together. Just a side note, though, you know, the embassy itself is still closed, but Govrin will be working out of his home, which is also good.
In Cairo.
Cairo, that's right, a private home until the embassy is opened. But I'll tell you more about everything in the report right now.
Absolutely.
The ambassador and his staff were evacuated from Cairo 8 months ago after security threats erupted at the embassy gates. Similar situations forced an emergency airlift evacuation of the staff back in 2011 as well. Although Israel and Egypt signed a peace deal over 25 years ago, tensions between the people have remained extremely high. The Israeli government sees Egypt as a critical ally in the fight against Hamas, and for months now we've seen Israeli security convening in Cairo in hopes of reopening the embassy. Now, though, with the Israeli ambassador's return to Egypt, it looks like things may finally be cooling off, and hopefully it means a true people's peace is soon to follow.
Ever since the THC molecule was extracted by Professor Mushallam back in 1964, Israel has been at the forefront of the world's cannabis research and industry. This fact is perfectly exemplified by the diverse cannabis economy that has sprouted in Israel and which gathers for the annual Cannatech conference in Tel Aviv. Well, joining us in the studio now to tell us more about this green frontier is founder and CEO of the ICANN Israel Cannabis Organization, Sol Kaye. Thank you so much for coming in.
Pleasure. Thanks for having me.
So let's start by talking about legislation here in Israel. Cannabis was recently decriminalized just several months ago in Israel. Now, have you seen any noticeable change in terms of the treatment that cannabis users are receiving since then?
So I think we're not seeing it as much in the legalization sense and decriminalization. Yes, there are less arrests, but there are still arrests. It's not completely decriminalized. We're seeing a big move in the medical cannabis side. So there are 3,000 new approvals per month for patients.
How many people are approved?
Over 30,000
Over
now.
30,000 here in Israel.
Yeah.
And I think what's very interesting is kind of the entire issue of why there has been so much movement forward and why Israel is a frontier for medical cannabis in the first place. Why would you say that Israel is so leading in this industry?
Being a small country, I think, helped a lot. Removing the stigma early when your grandmother is using it or when your friend's child for cancer is using it, the stigma goes away really quickly.
Right.
And that happened in Israel. We know people who are using it. 30,000 patients is now a large number. It's something significant.
Absolutely.
And that, you know, separation by 2 people in Israel, where normally it's 8 people. So everyone knows someone in Israel who's benefited from medical cannabis.
And it's interesting because cannabis is, in terms of medical research more specifically, Israel really is leading. There are a lot of other countries that are coming here for not only advice, but they want to get their hands on the data and statistics coming out of this country. What are some interesting facts that we have learned recently?
I think we're seeing things that we never expected. Treating autism in kids, ADD, ALS, Parkinson's, neurological diseases that don't have other treatments. These are the things where cannabis really can shine. Ashkenazi Jewish diseases, Crohn's disease, asthma, rheumatoid arthritis. This is, you know, once we start gathering enough data and that data starts to mean something, and we've got some really great data scientists in Israel, we can start to apply that data to much larger populations.
So, I mean, clearly gathering this information has had a huge impact on the exports coming out of Israel towards other countries in the world. Tell us a little bit about what is happening with cannabis abroad and that relationship with Israel.
So I think everywhere is moving towards some form of cannabis regulation.
Right.
They're changing it up. But until that happens, there's 3 years till patients can get access. Israel's got a lead. We're already producing. We have the data. We know it's safe. So allowing export from Israel, which is now going to happen, allows the countries that are implementing their own program to really come in and provide medication right now for their patients. And that's unique.
It's a very big deal. And obviously, like you said, Israel is kind of the center in terms of the exports that are going to be happening here. Now, let's also talk about something very different and very interesting, the kibbutzim here in Israel, the kibbutz communities. There are reports of a newly revitalized kibbutz movement that is based on the idea of cultivating cannabis. Is the government going to support something like this?
They have supported it. Of the new applications to grow medical cannabis in Israel, a large proportion of them are kibbutzim. They recognize that, you know, tomatoes you fetch $2 to $3 a kilogram.
Right.
Here you fetch $10 per gram. There's obviously an economy that they want to get behind. And the government has actually taken moves to support that, to allow those groups, those communities who are already in agriculture to continue being in agriculture.
So speaking of those high costs, what will it take for the price per gram to go down, if that can happen at all?
I think insurance should be covering medical cannabis. It's proven that people who are taking cannabis for medicinal purposes reduce their prescription usage by 30 to 40%. So there's a clear incentive for insurance companies, for Clalit, for Maccabi, Mouchedet, to cover the cost of medical cannabis. That won't help the street price of illegal cannabis, because that's market forces. But, you know, medicalization typically leads to legalization, and then the price stabilizes.
All right, well, I guess we're just going to have to wait and see what happens, but thank you so much for coming in, Solke.
Thank you.
Last month, the Israeli courts made a controversial and landmark decision to place even more barriers in front of same-sex couples trying to adopt children. But now the state has completely reversed its discriminatory position on the matter and is calling on the Knesset to amend the law and allow gay couples to adopt just like anyone else. When the High Court announced their verdict in July, it drew harsh criticism from rights groups all over the world. At the time, the government voiced total support for the decision, claiming that same-sex parents placed an additional burden on children. But just a few weeks later, in a shocking reversal, Israel's Welfare and Social Affairs Ministry has totally changed its stance. Welfare Minister Chaim Katz has just announced that there is no place for setting threshold conditions on adoptions, contrary to what the ministry said back in July. It's clear that the government is now recognizing the plight of same-sex couples in Israel who, for decades, have been struggling for equal rights under the law. Katz seems well aware of the discussion happening all over the country, saying that in these circumstances and in a matter that has such significant social implications in today's Israeli society, it appears that the proper place for further discussion of this issue is the legislature. Well, this is a major win for same-sex couples in Israel, and now the ball moves into the Knesset's court. They say you shouldn't play with your food, but what if it's for a good cause? Well, the annual Color Food photo exhibit is back in Tel Aviv, and I, for one, cannot wait to hear more about it. So joining me in the studio today is a photographer and founder of the Color Food exhibition, Dan Lev, and the PR consultant for the Ben Ami Gallery, Michal Sadan. Thank you guys so much for joining us.
Thank you for inviting us.
All right, so let's start with the basic question. What is the Color Food exhibit?
Color Food project is a project that combines and do the collaboration between chefs, art, inspiration, color, and food, of course. It's about playing with food. It's about doing something that's really abstract, outside the plate. Chefs choose color, bring an inspiration image, and as an artist, they play with food and they create something that it's really amazing just as a result.
Yeah, and I mean, it looks delicious. I'm already hungry just seeing some of these photos. But I think, you know, we're also seeing just a growing movement of how restaurants are changing how they present their food in the first place, because it can be art, it can be seen as art, and this is a clear example.
Yeah, the concept and the idea of color food began from the knowing and the idea that you're coming to the restaurant, the first thing that you see is color.
Right.
And you see texture. And when you take pictures of food, it's really hard to bring the taste and the smell So you bring first color, you bring texture, and then you bring emotions. And it's a painting. It's kind of a painting that chefs paint on a plate.
No, it's amazing because, you know, I'm seeing these photos and like I said, they're making me hungry, but this is ultimately artwork. That's what it is. So I'd like to actually hear about the way in which this exhibit is going to impact some special people in need. I understand that the proceeds are going to a special cause, right?
Yes, Ben Ami Gallery was established as a social gallery. We try to bring the periphery into Tel Aviv and on the contrary, to bring what Tel Aviv has to say about art to the periphery.
Beautiful.
And we do everything from a social agenda. And this exhibition, when we got the idea with a Hamat company, with Dan Lev, such a wonderful...
Which is a faucet company, a
exactly,
water company.
And actually the exhibition is inspired by water. Here you see the faucet. Right. So we decided that it's for a wonderful cause. And when we sell the photos, everything, not 20% or 30%, everything is going to be donated to the organization Chaim, for children who, unfortunately, they are ill with cancer. And it is so exciting, and we sold already few items, and we continue.
Well, absolutely. I think you will continue, because I would want this in my kitchen, my dining room, just to be able to look at it. Now, I also understand this exhibit is in the Ben Ami Gallery, which you represent as well. Can you tell us a little bit about that gallery and what other exhibitions we can see there?
Actually, the gallery is located in the south side of Tel Aviv, as we call the Soho of Tel Aviv.
Yeah.
It started, this area is really developed now, the Levantine, Florentine area, and we really feel that it's going to be one of the most important galleries in Tel Aviv, and we are doing our effort to make this gallery to become one of the voices of art in Tel Aviv.
Well, so for our viewers who are interested in checking out this color food exhibit, it's only going on for a couple more days, unfortunately, but there will be more exhibits, and I'm sure there will be another one just like this. Thank you so much for coming in.
Thank you.
All right, as we all know, puppies have a very tough life. I mean, they spend all day nibbling treats, playing with toys, sniffing other puppies. I mean, no wonder they're always so sleepy. Well, now an Israeli travel group is offering dogs an all-expense-paid vacation to Israel. Oh yeah, and they're allowed to bring a human too. Vibe Israel is inviting American pups to apply for Dog Plus One, an exclusive 5-day trip to Israel, including tours and relaxation time in Jerusalem and Tel Aviv. Tel Aviv is, of course, considered the destination doggy capital of the world, with more pups per capita than any other place on Earth. The contest has a few rules, though. Anyone can apply, although your dog has to be under 20 pounds, and it helps if they have their very own active social media presence. That's because Vibe Israel wants to expand awareness of Israel among 20-somethings Americans. Now, the group CEO, Joanna Landau, is hoping the contest gives millennials all over the world a chance to discover Israel from a different perspective, free of the politics. So if you think your pup has the right stuff, then act quick. The application form is on the website doggyvacayisrael.com, and you've only got until mid-September to apply.
Enroll in eTeacher's online Hebrew courses and quickly discover that it creates the deepest connection to Israel that you could ever imagine.
And now time for the word of the day. Earlier, we announced the government's support of same-sex couples to adopt children. So today, our word of the day is imutz, which is how you say adoption in Hebrew. Now, an imutz or adoption might be one of the biggest mitzvot or good deeds out there. And there's certainly a big need for all kinds of imutzim or adoptions all over the world today. You can le'amitz yeled or adopt a child, but there's also pet imutz. I mean, who wouldn't want to adopt a fluffy kitty or an adorable puppy? Finally, in case you thought, hey, imutz sure sounds like ometz, which is the Hebrew word for courage, well, there's no linguistic connection between the two words that we could find, but if you're considering an imutz sometime in the future, then I'd say the connection to ometz is that you've already got lots of it. All right, let's go ahead and take a look at the weather forecast. Tonight is supposed to be clear to partly cloudy with a low of 73 or 23 degrees Celsius. Tomorrow is expected to be clearer and with little to no change in temperatures. The high will be around 86 or 30 degrees Celsius. All right, that's it for today's news. Today's exchange rate is 3.57 shekels to the American dollar. Remember to sign up for our daily newsletter at iltv.tv. I'm Natasha Kirchak, and thanks for watching.